He woke up with a sharp pain in his head. The world around him felt wrong. The ground beneath him was not soft like grass or hard like stone. It was smooth, cold, and gave a faint metallic sound when he moved. His eyes opened slowly, struggling against a strange brightness. At first, everything was blurry, as if he was underwater. Shapes moved above him, but he could not tell what they were. He tried to remember the last thing he knew. He was on Earth, in his small apartment. He had gone to bed after a long day. But now he was lying in the middle of a strange open place. His heart began to race. The air smelled strange, not like fresh air or smoke, but a mix of sweetness and sharpness. It filled his lungs in a way that made him feel both dizzy and awake. He turned his head and froze. The sky above was nothing like he had ever seen. It was not blue, it was green, a deep emerald green. 3 suns hung in the sky, one large and golden, 2 smaller and pale white. Thin clouds swirled in patterns that looked almost alive. The whole sky seemed to move slowly, twisting and changing shape. He sat up, feeling the cold metal floor under his hands. It was smooth, but it had faint glowing lines running through it, like veins. He followed the lines with his eyes until they vanished into the ground far ahead. There was no sound except for a faint hum, like a machine running somewhere deep below. Then he heard footsteps, soft, almost silent, but clear enough to make his heart jump. He turned toward the sound. At first, he saw only a shadow moving between strange tall plants that glowed faintly. Then she stepped into the light, a girl but not human. Her skin was pale, almost white, with a soft glow to it. Her hair flowed like silver water down to her waist, moving slightly, even though there was no wind. And her eyes were silver, glowing softly, and they were locked on him. It felt like she was looking directly into his thoughts, into the deepest part of him. She stood completely still, just staring. Her face had no clear expression, neither anger nor kindness. It was as if she was trying to understand what he was. He opened his mouth to speak, but his voice came out dry and weak. Where am I?" he asked. She tilted her head slightly, as if she had never heard his language before. Then she took one slow step toward him, her eyes never leaving his. For a moment, neither of them moved. The hum from the ground seemed louder. He could feel his heartbeat in his ears. She finally spoke, but the words were strange, soft, flowing like a song he couldn't understand. Yet somehow the sound of her voice made the hairs on his arms stand up. It was beautiful and unsettling. At the same time, she stopped only a few steps away, slowly. She crouched down so her face was level with his. Her glowing eyes reflected the strange green light of the sky. She studied him as if every small detail mattered. Then she reached out her hand. He hesitated, unsure if touching her was safe, but something in her gaze told him she wasn't here to harm him. At least, not yet. When her fingers touched his, a sudden rush of images flashed in his mind. Strange cities, glowing rivers, skies filled with stars he didn't recognize. It was too much, and he pulled his hand back quickly, gasping for air. Her eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but as if she had just learned something important. Then, without another word, she stood up and turned away. She took a few steps, then looked over her shoulder. Motioning for him to follow, he looked around, unsure what else to do. The place was empty, silent and unfamiliar. If he stayed, he might never know what was going on. If he followed, maybe she could give him answers. Taking a deep breath, he pushed himself to his feet and followed her into the strange, glowing forest ahead. The plants, they were tall and thin, their surfaces smooth and glass-like. They pulsed with light every few seconds, as if alive. The ground was soft now, covered with a thin layer of moss that glowed faintly with every step. In the distance, strange sounds echoed, high-pitched whistles, deep rumbles, and faint clicks. It was like the world itself was alive and watching them. The girl never looked back, except once. When she did, her silver eyes met his for a brief second. And in that moment, he felt something strange, a mix of warning and trust, like she knew something dangerous was close, and that the only way he might survive was to stay by her side. He followed her through the glowing forest, his footsteps soft against the moss-covered ground. She moved quickly, but with a strange grace, almost as if she was floating. Her silver hair caught the green light from above, shining like liquid metal in the air. She didn't speak, not a single word, but she glanced back every now and then, making sure he was still there. He felt both safe and uneasy in her presence. It was clear she wanted him to follow, but he didn't know why. The forest was unlike anything he had ever seen. Some trees had transparent trunks filled with glowing liquid that slowly moved upward, like blood in a vein. Others bent toward him as he passed, as though they were curious. He tried to ignore the feeling that the plants were alive and watching him. The air was warm, but not uncomfortably so. A faint hum still filled the background, the same one he had heard when he first woke up. It seemed to come from the ground itself, deep and steady. He tried to speak again. "Who are you? What is this place?" he asked. She didn't answer. She only stopped for a moment, turned her head slightly as if listening to something far away, then kept walking. It was strange. She didn't act like she was ignoring him out of rudeness. It was more like she was focused on something else entirely. They passed a strange pool of water that glowed blue from beneath. Tiny shapes swam inside it, but they weren't fish. Their bodies were made of light, shifting and changing shape when one came near the surface. He reached out to touch it before his fingers could reach the water. The girl quickly grabbed his wrist and shook her head. Her silver eyes locked on his with a warning. He understood whatever those creatures were. Touching them was a bad idea. The deeper they went into the forest, the stranger the sounds became. He heard sharp clicking noises in the distance, followed by low rumbling growls. It made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. The girl stopped suddenly, raising her hand for him to be still. She crouched low, listening, her eyes scanning the trees. The sound came again, closer. This time she turned to him and placed her finger over her lips. Her meaning was clear. Be silent. Then the noise grew louder. Something was moving through the forest, large and heavy. The ground seemed to shake with every step it took. Through the glowing mist, he saw a massive shadow. His breath caught in his throat. The creature stepped into view. It was huge, almost twice the size of a horse. Its body was covered in dark armored plates, and it had 6 long legs ending in claws. Its head was long and narrow, with glowing yellow eyes that scanned the ground. When it exhaled, a cloud of steam poured from its mouth, smelling of rot and metal. The girl crouched lower, her eyes never leaving the beast. She moved her hand slowly, signaling for him to back away. But the ground beneath his foot gave a soft crunch. A dry branch broke, the sound sharp in the silence. The creature froze, its head turned toward them, those glowing yellow eyes locking directly on him. His heart pounded so hard he was sure the creature could hear it. The girl moved fast, grabbing his hand and pulling him behind the massive roots of a nearby tree. The roots were warm and pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. He could hear the creature moving closer, the ground trembling under its weight. It sniffed the air, a deep, slow sound that made his skin crawl. The girl's grip on his hand tightened, her silver eyes wide with tension. They stayed completely still. Seconds felt like hours. The beast took another step closer, then another. It was so close now, he could see the small cracks in its armor-like skin, glowing faintly from within. The creature let out a low growl. It was searching. Then, just when it seemed like it was about to reach around the tree, the girl moved. It was quick, almost too fast for him to follow. She pulled a small crystal blade from somewhere in her clothing. The blade glowed blue, casting strange shadows on her face. She didn't attack the beast. Instead, she struck the ground in front of it. The moment the blade hit, a flash of light exploded outward. The creature roared in pain, stumbling back as if blinded. "Run," she said, one of the first words he understood, and she didn't need to repeat it. They ran through the forest, their feet pounding against the glowing moss. Branches whipped past them, glowing insects scattered as they passed. The roars of the beast echoed behind them, but the sound was getting farther away. Finally, they reached a small clearing. And she stopped. She bent over, breathing heavily. Her silver hair falling over her face, he collapsed onto the ground, his chest heaving. For the first time since he had arrived in this world, he realized something. Whatever this place was dangerous, and the only reason he was still alive was because she was keeping him alive. They stood in the small clearing, both breathing hard. The girl's silver eyes scanned the forest, her head tilting slightly as if she was listening to something. He could still hear faint echoes of the beast's roar in the distance. But it was fading. For a moment, he thought they were safe. But the girl's tense posture told him otherwise. She glanced at him, then pointed toward a narrow path leading deeper into the forest. Her meaning was clear. They had to keep moving. The path was lined with strange plants that gave off a faint egeet blue glow. Some looked like flowers, but their petals moved slowly as if they were breathing. Others were long and thin, swaying gently even though there was no wind. Every step they took made the ground pulse faintly with light. The hum beneath the earth seemed louder here, almost like it was alive after several minutes. The girl suddenly stopped. She raised her hand, signaling him to be still. He froze, listening. At first, he heard nothing. Then it came a deep, rhythmic thudding. It was different from the sound the first beast had made. This was faster, sharper, and it was getting closer. The girl crouched low and motioned for him to follow. They slipped off the path and moved into the thick roots of a massive tree. The tree was enormous, its base wide enough to hide several people. The roots twisted together, forming dark spaces between them. She pulled him into one of these gaps, pressing a finger to her lips. He could feel the warmth of the roots against his back, a faint vibration like a slow heartbeat. Through the small opening, he saw movement. Not one creature this time, three. They were smaller than the first beast, but faster. Their bodies were long and sleek, covered in scales that shimmered. In the green light, each had 4 legs with sharp claws and long tails that swished back and forth. Their heads were narrow, their eyes glowing bright orange. They moved in perfect silence, except for the soft thud of their feet. One stopped, sniffing the air. The others spread out, circling. It was clear they were hunting. His breath caught in his throat. He looked at the girl, but she didn't move. Her eyes followed the creatures with a calm focus. Slowly, she reached for the crystal blade at her side. She didn't draw it. Yet, she was waiting. The creatures moved closer, their tails flicking in unison. One stopped directly in front of the tree, its nose twitching. It let out a low hiss, revealing rows of sharp teeth. Suddenly, one of them leaped forward, landing on the roots above their heads. Its claws dug into the bark with a loud scrape. The sound made the others move faster. Closing in, the girl reacted instantly. She sprang from the hiding spot, her crystal blade flashing in the green light. The nearest creature lunged at her, but she ducked low, striking its leg. The blade cut clean through, and the creature let out a high-pitched scream. It stumbled, but the others didn't hesitate. 2 more charged at her from different sides. He didn't think. He moved, grabbing a thick branch from the ground. He swung it at the nearest creature. The blow landed hard, but the creature barely flinched. It turned toward him, eyes glowing with hunger before it could strike. The girl was there, her blade cutting across its neck. The orange glow in its eyes faded instantly as it collapsed to the ground. The last creature circled them, its movements slow and calculating. It was bigger than the others, its scales darker and thicker. It didn't rush in like the rest. It was waiting for an opening. The girl and the man stood back to back. He could hear her breathing, calm and steady. The creature hissed again, a sound low and dangerous. Then, in a burst of speed, it lunged. The girl sidestepped, slashing with her blade. The cut was deep, but not enough to kill it. It whirled around, tail whipping toward her. The blow knocked the blade from her hand, sending it spinning into the moss. The man saw the creature rear back, ready to strike. Without thinking, he grabbed the crystal blade. The handle was warm in his hand, the blue glow brightening instantly. The creature turned toward him, its orange eyes locking on his. Time seemed to slow. He stepped forward and drove the blade into its chest. A flash of light burst from the wound, and the creature let out a final deafening scream before collapsing. The forest went silent. He stood there, breathing hard, the blade still in his hand. The girl looked at him, her silver eyes unreadable. Then, slowly, she gave a small nod. It wasn't a smile, but it was something approval. He handed the blade back to her. She took it, her fingers brushing against his for a brief moment. Then she turned and began walking again. No words were spoken, but he understood they were still being hunted, and the danger was far from over. They walked for what felt like hours. The forest began to change, the trees growing taller and thinner, their trunks twisting toward the sky like reaching arms. The glowing moss faded away, replaced by a dark soil that gave off faint heat. The air smelled sharper here, like burning metal mixed with rain. Neither of them spoke, but the silence wasn't empty, was heavy with unspoken questions. He kept replaying the fight in his mind, the feel of the crystal blade in his hand, the strange warmth that spread through him when he held it. It was unlike any weapon he had touched before, and he couldn't forget the way she had looked at him afterward. Not just as a stranger she had to protect, but almost as an equal. It was the first time since waking in this alien world that he felt connected to someone. The girl, he still didn't know her name, moved with the same quiet grace as before. But now, every so often, she would glance back at him, not the cold, distant glances from earlier. These were softer, almost curious. It made him wonder if she was beginning to trust him. Even a little. They came to a narrow ridge, the ground sloping sharply on either side. Far below, a river of glowing liquid wound through the valley, its surface shifting like molten glass. The hum from the ground was louder here, vibrating through his feet. The girl stopped at the edge, crouched, and placed her palm on the soil, her eyes closed, her breathing slowing. When she opened them again, she turned to him and spoke. In broken words, "Not safe here. They hunt still." He nodded, even though he didn't know who they were. The only thing he understood was that danger still followed them. A sound broke the stillness, a sharp crack in the distance. The girl's head snapped toward it. Without warning, she grabbed his hand and pulled him down the ridge. They slid on the loose soil, the heat seeping through his boots. At the bottom, she led him into a tunnel formed by the roots of a giant tree. The inside was dim, lit only by faint blue crystals embedded in the walls. The air was cooler here, the hum more muffled. They stopped in a small chamber where the roots curved upward, forming a dome overhead. The girl sat down, resting her blade beside her. For the first time since meeting her, he saw her shoulders relax. He lowered himself to the ground across from her. The tension in his chest eased slightly, replaced by the heavy ache of exhaustion. She watched him for a long moment before finally speaking. Her voice was soft but carried weight. "You fight well." For not knowing, she said, her words slow and careful. He gave a small, tired laugh. I had help. Her silver eyes narrowed slightly. Studying him again, then she touched her chest. Lyra, she said. It took him a second to realize she was telling him her name. Lyra, he repeated, the sound strange but pleasant on his tongue. She nodded once, then pointed at him, her eyebrow raised. Daniel, he replied. She repeated his name quietly, as if testing the sound, then gave a faint nod. They sat in silence again, but it felt different now. There was a small bridge between them names. He wanted to ask her 1,000 questions, where they were, why he was here, who was hunting them, but before he could, a deep rumble shook the ground. Dust fell from the roots above. Lyra's expression hardened instantly. She grabbed her blade, her body tense. Move, she said sharply. Pulling him to his feet, they rushed through the twisting tunnel until they emerged into the forest again. The green sky had darkened, the 3 suns now low on the horizon. Shadows stretched long across the ground, and the air felt heavier in the distance. Faint lights flickered to steady to be natural. Lyra led him toward them, moving quickly but carefully. The hum beneath the earth was stronger with every step. When they reached a rise in the ground, he saw it, a wall impossibly high. Made of crystal that glowed from within, it shimmered with colors that shifted like oil on water. Lyra pressed her hand against a small mark near the base. The wall rippled, and a narrow doorway appeared. She motioned for him to follow, and together they stepped inside. What lay beyond took his breath away. City floating lights hovered above streets lined with alien structures that seemed to grow out of the ground. The air was filled with soft, music-like tones. Creatures of all shapes moved through the streets. Some glanced at them, others stared openly. But when their eyes landed on him, the whispers began. Faces turned cold. Some fearful, some angry. Daniel felt the weight of their stares. He didn't know what they were saying, but it was clear he was not welcome. Lyra stepped in front of him, her posture protective. A tall, armored alien approached, its armor black and gleaming. It spoke in a deep voice that made the air vibrate. Lyra's expression darkened, her grip tightening on her blade, without another word. She grabbed Daniel's wrist and pulled him into a narrow alley. They know. You are not from here, she whispered, her eyes full of urgency. Lyra moved quickly through the narrow alley, her silver hair catching the faint light from the floating lanterns above. Daniel kept up as best as he could, his eyes darting to every shadow. The city felt alive, but not in a safe way. Was as if the streets themselves were watching. Voices echoed from the main road behind them. Deeper and harsher than normal conversation, whoever that armored alien was. He had drawn attention, and it was spreading fast. They turned a corner and entered a side street lined with strange stalls. Vendors sold glowing fruits, crystal weapons, and fabrics that shimmered like liquid. The smells were strong sweet, bitter and smoky all at once. Lyra pulled her hood over her head and gestured for Daniel to do the same. He tugged his own hood low, hoping it would hide his human face, but he could still feel the stares. Every alien they passed seemed to pause, their eyes narrowing. A child pointed at him before being pulled away by its parent. They reached a small door at the end of the street. Lyra knocked in a quick, sharp pattern 3 taps. A pause, then 2. The door slid open without a sound, and a tall, tin alien with glowing green eyes stood there. It looked at Lyra, then at Daniel, and its expression changed instantly. You brought him here? It said in a low, urgent voice. Lyra replied quickly in her own language, her tone firm. The alien hesitated, then stepped aside to let them inside. The space was dim and filled with a soft, humming sound. The walls were made of smooth black stone that reflected tiny pinpoints of light. Daniel realized they weren't lights at all. They were small creatures. like fireflies that clung to the walls. The air was cooler here, almost fresh. Lyra led him into a back room where a single round table sat in the center. She motioned for him to sit while she spoke quietly with the green-eyed alien. From where he sat, Daniel could only catch bits of their conversation. His name came up once, followed by a word Lyra had used before: hunt. The alien glanced at him several times, its expression somewhere between concern and disbelief. Finally, it left the room, leaving Lyra alone with him. They will look for you, she said, her voice low. If they find you. No escape. Daniel leaned forward. Who are they? Lyra's gaze flicked toward the door, then back to him. Guards of the Dominion, she said. They rule. Her eyes softened slightly, and they do not want your kind here. Before he could ask more, a loud crash echoed outside. The green-eyed alien rushed back in. Speaking rapidly, Lyra's eyes widened. Whatever he said was bad. She grabbed Daniel's arm and pulled him toward the back of the building. They slipped through a narrow passage that led into a network of tunnels beneath the city. The air down here was damp, the walls covered in glowing moss. Water dripped somewhere in the distance, each drop loud in the silence. They moved quickly, the sound of boots above them growing louder. Daniel's chest tightened. He realized the Dominion guards were already searching nearby. Why are they after me? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lyra didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, her words were slow, as if she was choosing them carefully. You are dangerous to them, she said. Not because of what you do, but what you are. Her silver eyes met his. They fear you. Before he could ask why, they reached a hidden chamber deep beneath the streets. It was small, but filled with strange objects, crystal maps, glowing orbs, and a table covered with old scrolls. Lyra closed the door behind them and took a deep breath. You? Not first human here, she said. Daniel froze. What do you mean? Her gaze was steady. Long ago, one came, like you, the Dominion. Tried to capture him. They failed. And because they failed, their city burned. The weight of her words sank in. If what she was saying was true, the Dominion saw him not as a man, but as a threat to their control. They will not stop, Lyra continued. They will hunt until you are gone. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. But you are not alone now. A deep rumble shook the chamber, dust falling from the ceiling. Lyra's head snapped up, her hand going to her crystal blade. The sound came again, closer this time. She moved to the wall, pressing her ear against it. Her eyes narrowed. They found us, she said, her voice calm but tense. She turned to him, her silver eyes glowing brighter in the dim light. Stay behind me, she said. The door burst open, shadows filling the room. Dominion soldiers in black armor stormed in, their weapons aimed. Daniel's pulse raced. Lyra raised her blade, the blue glow lighting her face. In that moment, Daniel knew whatever happened next, his life was now tied to hers. The Dominion soldiers moved into the room with perfect precision. Their black armor reflected the blue glow from Lyra's blade. Their weapons were long, thin spears that hummed with an electric charge. Daniel could feel the air around them vibrate. One soldier stepped forward, his voice cold and sharp, speaking in a language Daniel couldn't understand. Lyra replied in the same tongue, her words quick and firm. The soldier's eyes narrowed, his grip on his weapon tightening. Daniel couldn't tell what they were saying, but the tension in the air was heavy. Lyra's stance was protective, her body slightly angled in front of him. The soldier took another step forward, pointing his spear at Daniel's chest without warning. Lyra moved her blade, slashing in a blur of blue light. The spear split in half, sparks flying. The soldiers reacted instantly, 3 of them lunging forward. Daniel stumbled back, His heart pounding, Lyra fought with fluid movements, her blade flashing in the dim light. She ducked under one strike, turned, and cut through another spear. The sound of metal hitting the floor rang through the chamber. But there were too many. One soldier got past her guard. Grabbing Daniel by the arm, the grip was like steel. Pulling him forward, Daniel struggled. But it was useless till Lyra's blade sliced through the soldier's gauntlet, forcing him to let go. Move. She shouted, the word clear even in her broken English. She grabbed his wrist and pulled him toward a narrow side tunnel. They ran through the twisting passage, the sounds of pursuit echoing behind them. Daniel's legs burned, his lungs ached. But Lyra didn't slow. The tunnel sloped upward, the hum in the ground growing stronger with every step. At last, they burst into the open air. The alien sky stretching above them, the city's crystal wall loomed behind them, glowing faintly. In the distance, they were outside the city now. Standing on a rocky cliff that overlooked a vast plain, the wind was sharp and cold, carrying the scent of metal and dust. Lyra stopped, letting go of his wrist. Her silver eyes were locked on the horizon, where a faint light shimmered far away. Daniel bent over, catching his breath. What was that? Why are they after me? He asked, his voice rough. Lyra didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked to the edge of the cliff, her hair lifting slightly in the wind. Finally, she spoke, her voice low. You are not just man from another world, she said slowly. You are the key. He stared at her, confused. Key to what? She turned to face him, her expression serious. My people can see souls, she said, touching her chest. When I look at others, I see colors, shapes, light. But when I look at you, she stepped closer, her gaze locking with his. I see something I have never seen before. Daniel swallowed, unsure if he should feel honored or afraid. What do you see? He asked quietly. She hesitated, as if the words themselves were dangerous. I see many paths, many endings, and all of them change everything. He shook his head, trying to make sense of it. I'm just a guy from Earth, he said. I don't know anything about this world. Her eyes softened slightly, but her tone stayed firm. That is why they fear you, she said, the Dominion. They believe humans bring chaos. They believe you can break their hold. Daniel frowned. Why would they think that? Lyra's gaze shifted to the horizon again. Long ago, one came before you, she said. He was like you. Lost. Confused, the Dominion tried to control him. They failed, and when they failed, he burned their city to the ground. A cold shiver ran down Daniel's spine, and now they think I'm going to do the same. Lyra nodded slowly. They will not take risk. They will kill you before you can change anything. The wind picked up, carrying the faint sound of something in the distance, low, rhythmic, like drums. Lyra's eyes narrowed. They come, she said simply. Daniel turned, and his stomach dropped. Dark shapes were moving across the plain. Dozens of them. The glint of armor caught the fading light. The Dominion soldiers were already closing in. Lyra stepped closer to him, placing a hand on his shoulder. You can leave, she said, her voice softer now. I know a way. Back to your world. Daniel blinked in surprise. You can send me home. She nodded. Yes. But if you stay, she paused, searching for the right words. If you stay, you fight. With me, the choice hit him like a weight. He thought of the danger, the fear, the strange beauty of this world. And he thought of Lyra, the way she had fought for him. The way she looked at him as if he mattered. The sound of the approaching army grew louder. The ground trembling beneath their boots. He met her gaze, his voice steady. I'm not leaving you, he said. Her silver eyes brightened, and for the first time, he saw a real smile on her face. Then, she said, drawing her blade, we fight. The wind howled across the cliff, carrying the heavy sound of marching boots. The Dominion army moved like a black wave across the plain, their armor glinting under the pale light of the three suns. Daniel stood beside Lyra, his hands tight at his sides. The weight of his decision settled in his chest. But there was no turning back now. He had chosen to stay, and staying meant fighting. Lyra's silver eyes scanned the approaching force. Her posture was calm, but he could feel the tension in her body. She had fought many times before. He could see that in her every movement, but this was different. This time, she wasn't fighting for her people alone. She was fighting for him. Daniel's mind raced. He had no armor, no weapon, only the memory of the crystal blade in his hand. As if sensing his thoughts, Lyra held out her weapon to him. He shook his head. "You need it more." She gave a small, determined smile. "You fight better than you think," she said, placing the blade in his hand. The warmth from the weapon spread through his arm instantly, the blue glow brightening as his fingers tightened around the hilt. The army drew closer, their formation tightening at the front road. A towering figure in black and gold armor, his helmet shaped like the head of a predator. When he spoke, his voice rolled across the plain like thunder. Lyra replied in her language, her tone sharp, her stance unyielding. The figure's answer was short and final. With a single motion of his hand, the army advanced. Daniel's heart pounded as the first wave broke forward. Lyra moved before he could think, leaping into the air with a grace that seemed impossible. Her blade cut through the first soldier's weapon, sparks flying. Daniel stepped forward, swinging the crystal blade at an enemy who lunged toward him. The weapon felt alive in his hands, guiding his movements. Every strike sent a pulse through his arm. Every block felt like it was predicting the attack before it came. The noise was deafening, clashing weapons, shouts, the sharp hum of electric spears, dust and sparks filled the air. Daniel fought beside Lyra, their movements falling into an unspoken rhythm. When one of them struck, the other covered. When one stumbled, the other pulled them back to their feet. But the soldiers kept coming. For every one they cut down, two more stepped forward. Daniel's muscles burned. His lungs screamed for air. Still, he kept moving. The thought of stopping unthinkable. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was about standing with Lyra. No matter the cost, a sudden blast shook the ground. Daniel turned just in time to see a massive war beast charging toward them. Its armor was thick, its tusks sharp enough to cut stone. Lyra's eyes widened, and for the first time, he saw fear flash across her face. The beast roared, shaking the air, and charged. Lyra shoved Daniel out of the way just as the beast's tusks tore into the ground where he had been standing. He hit the dirt hard. The wind knocked from his lungs. When he looked up, Lyra was already moving, dodging the beast's strikes, her blade flashing. But the creature was too strong, too fast. It swung its massive head, catching her side and sending her crashing into the rocks. Daniel's chest tightened, his vision narrowing. Without thinking, he ran toward the beast, the crystal blade glowing brighter with every step. He ducked under its tusk and drove the blade deep into the glowing seam between its armor plates. A burst of blue light erupted, the beast letting out a deafening scream before collapsing. Daniel pulled the blade free, his arms trembling. When he turned, Lyra was already back on her feet, blood running down her arm. Her silver eyes met his, a mix of pride and relief shining there. The army was faltering now, their formation breaking. The leader in black and gold armor stepped forward, his voice booming with anger. He charged at them himself, his strikes fast and powerful. Daniel and Lyra fought together, their blades moving in perfect harmony. Every clash sent shockwaves through the ground. Finally, Lyra saw an opening. She feinted left, drawing the leader's guard, and Daniel stepped in, driving the crystal blade in two. The gap in his armor, the leader staggered, his weapon falling from his hands. With a final sharp cry, he collapsed to the ground. The remaining soldiers hesitated, looking at their fallen commander. One by one, they began to retreat, their dark wave breaking apart and fading into the distance. Silence fell over the cliff, broken only by the sound of the wind. Daniel stood there, chest heaving, the crystal blade still glowing in his hand. Lyra stepped closer, her expression soft now. "You stayed," she said simply. He nodded. Still catching his breath, "I told you," he said. "I'm not leaving you," for the first time since he had met her. She smiled fully, the light in her eyes warm. "You are not just Key," she said. "You are my friend." My bond. Daniel felt the weight of her words settle in his heart. He knew the danger wasn't over. Maybe it never would be, but in that moment, standing beside her, he felt something stronger than fear. He felt like he belonged. Together, they turned toward the horizon. The three suns were setting, painting the sky in gold and silver light. The world ahead was still dangerous, still unknown, but they would face it side by side. Whatever came next.